Hello everyone, welcome to another tutorial, and today's take is another art journal tutorial where I use stamps as the focal point of my art journal. So here is the stamp that we'll be using. I stamped it with some waterproof ink on top of a 100% cotton cold pressed paper. As always with all my videos, the stamp, the products, etc., everything that I used will be mentioned in the description of the YouTube video, so that at any point of time you're curious as to what products I have used, you can definitely check the same below. Now once I stamp everything, I will color them using some CrafTangles liquid watercolors. So I have decided to use 4-5 different watercolors for this particular stamp. As always, the color names, details, etc., they'll be linked below. My idea for coloring the characters and the focal point as well as the colors that I wanted to go for the art journal was cool tones. So I wanted to use transfer it as a background, and using that as a reference I had decided to use the colors for my critters. Now I am using a shade of brown, pink, orange and yellow for my project, and I'll use the same shades later on as well to color my art journal. I will let you enjoy looking at the coloring as well as the fussy cutting. I have done a lot of tutorials on this earlier as well on my YouTube channel, where I discuss the details as to how I watercolor or how I fussy cut. So you can definitely check that out in case you are curious as to what is the exact technique that I use. But here I'm using the exact same technique. Once the fussy cutting and everything is completed, I'll be back in the video with the voiceover. So that was a quick flip through of all the pages that I have completed in this journal. If you're curious to learn of how I have made this each and every page, the video of all the pages tutorial is available on my YouTube channel. I'll also link down the playlist below for you in the description, so you can check the playlist out as well. Now here is the transfer it that I told you, that I was going to use as a part of my project. So I was just playing around with ideas of how I want to create the layout. Now since this pattern is very busy, I decided not to cover the whole art journal page with it, rather than just add small rectangles which will kind of create a focal point for my page. And that is why I created this small rectangle, and I'm just eyeballing it and adding it to the center of my page. Again, I'm not being extremely accurate in terms of measurement, etc. I'm just going with what my idea is, and I'm just going with the flow. Now I wet the transfer, and as soon as I wet the paper, you can see the water reacted with the paper, and I was able to remove the top part of the paper, and then what is left behind is this beautiful pattern. So I follow the same thing on the left as well. And here earlier this was what I was going to use. So I was going to use a twine in the background to create, and on top of it I was going to mount my characters. However, you'll see that later on I changed my mind. Now I'm prepping my art journal page with some gesso. Here I'm using white gesso. So it will do two things. It will prime my paper, as well as it will kind of tone down the whole colorful pattern that I have going on in the background, and it will kind of blend it with my white background as well. So here you can see the difference between the right and the left area, that the right is right now quite toned down and looks much more blended than the left side. So I'll follow the same thing on the left side as well. And again, you can see that I'm not adding a lot of gesso, because I don't want to cover the whole pattern. I just want to make it more blended. Now next I take a CrafTangles script stamp, and I'm using some vintage photo distress ink, and I'm stamping on top of my art journal page. Now here you could use any ink of your choice, any color, any ink pad will work. I have quite a huge collection of distress ink, and distress ink kind of don't give you perfect impression while stamping, and that is something which I really like in my art journal, so I tend to use distress inks. Now once I dry out all the inking, I move on to some stenciling, and for that I'm using one of the CrafTangles mixed media stencils. Again, whatever products I'm talking about or using will be linked below in the description for you all. And the texture paste that I am using along with it is clear texture paste. So right now you can see it looks white, however once dry it will dry clear. So what I like to do with this is, once I stencil the pattern, I like to go back with watercolors like how I'm doing. So I'm using the exact same watercolors that I used for coloring my critters, and I'm kind of just adding the watercolor around the stenciled area. So what this does is, if later on you can see that in the pictures that I share with you at the end of the video, that this kind of creates a watercolor look. However, since the pattern is done with a clear texture paste, it will resist all the coloring that we do on top of it. So it will kind of give you that embossed effect, and that is what I wanted. Plus I wanted to add a little bit of organic splashes of colors here and there. So that is why I am adding some watercolor, and I kind of used a brush because I wanted to do controlled watercoloring. Now here, since the background is quite busy, I have used a paper. This is a piece of vellum paper, and this is a thicker vellum paper. So this is specialty CrafTangles vellum paper that is 180 GSM thick, and I have kind of hand cut the strips of paper to create this kind of pattern, and then I use some of this leftover die cut from my earlier project on a mirror cardstock, and I am using them just to add a little bit of gold and accent here and there. And then on top of it I'll add a piece of lace. Again, this lace is very old from my stash, and then on top of it I'll add my stamped critter. So that will create the focal point of my art journal. Now, since in this particular art journal, I'm tackling both the pages together, which is right and left. Whenever I create a focal point, I try to use the same element on both the sides so that, they help with creating the same look and cohesiveness in the art journal. So I'm doing the exact same thing, and I'll repeat the exact same process on the left side as well. Now, since this is kind of a repetitive thing, I have kind of removed this part from the editing because I did not want to waste your time, and it's the exact same thing that I did, but I follow the same process. And here I will stick the cat rather than a dog, which we had created earlier. So now here is another technique which I like to use in my art journal, which is using my bottle bases. So this is actually the texture paste which we are using earlier. So the jar's base is what I'm using to create that round stamping. And for that I'll use two colors of distress ink. One color of distress ink, which is a vintage photo, which I had used earlier as well to stamp my script. And then since I have that round shape already ready, I'll use that as a reference and add the circles from the using the liquid watercolors which I had already removed for coloring my character. So again, the color combination, the color palette, everything remains same. It is just being repeated again and again in different forms so that it adds cohesiveness to our art journal page. Now here I felt, that kind of I wanted to add a little bit of more color, especially the oranges, because we had not used any orange and yellow till date on our page except the coloring of the character. And that is why I go back and I add splashes of colors here and there where I felt that we needed some colors. And that will complete my page, a very flat and simple page and a very colorful page, which is different from what I do normally for my mixed media journal. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I leave you with a lot of close-ups again so that you can see all that beautiful textures and colors that we used and created. As always, if you like my videos, don't forget to like, do comment. If you have any queries, please feel free to comment down below and I'll be happy to answer them for you. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel. I'll be back with another tutorial soon. Take care, guys.